Good afternoon. We should be live. So, Mr. Chair, when you're ready and when it's 4 o'clock, you can commence.
Thank you. We'll give it just another moment if we can. I have 3:59 on my watch, so yeah, and it looks like that just rolled over. So I guess we'll begin. Commissioners, this is a special meeting, and it's been convened to consider one agenda item today, and that's a change to our CEO's compensation in response to the COVID-19 crisis and its impact on agency revenues. Our next scheduled meeting is June 14th and 15th, and materials for that meeting, including updates on whether or not it will be conducted in person as originally intended or conducted as a remote meeting, will be determined and shared with you and industry based on what we learn over the next month about this public health crisis and further direction from Governor Brown and health authorities. At this point, my perspective is that there's a good chance that our June Commission meeting and possibly future meetings will be conducted virtually utilizing today's technology, Zoom, and live streaming through Travel Oregon's industry YouTube channel. And while this is no substitute for getting out into our communities and interacting personally with our industry colleagues and fellow Oregonians, the important discussions and decisions which we must undertake in the coming months can't be derailed. Given our singular agenda item for today's meeting and the urgency with which we are proceeding in our own businesses, unless any commissioners object, I'm going to ask Todd to provide a brief overview of what we are here to consider today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Let me begin by thanking all of you as members of the commission for your continued volunteer service, your passion for this state, your devotion to what we're doing in the travel and tourism industry, and taking time away from your families and your businesses during this time. To be candid, this is unprecedented. It's a word that's getting used a lot, but it's the word, you know, that the situation that we're finding ourselves in is unlike anything. Well, you hear people equating it to the Spanish flu, and that was 1918. So 102 years later, here we find ourselves talking about COVID-19. And given that, and given our situation and how we're funded, and having been tracking the impacts of both COVID-19 itself, as well as steps that are being taken globally, nationally, and here in Oregon to address the impacts of COVID-19, any of the steps to mitigate the spread, flatten the curve, as folks are saying. We have been serving on a variety of boards and councils that have been stood up. All agency directors, all state agency directors are now meeting twice a week, each week to go over changes from an HR perspective and other news that needs to get rolled out to all agencies. The governor has formed an economic advisory council to help her both identify and address the impacts of COVID-19, as well as the measures that have been put in place to help mitigate its impact, as I referenced earlier. You know, we at Travel Oregon have embraced this vision of a better life for all Oregonians through strong, sustainable local communities that welcome a diversity of explorers. And candidly, right now, it doesn't feel better. It doesn't feel better right now. It hurts. And to hear from my colleagues in the industry about situations they're facing, whether they are sole proprietorships or they're managing a corporate hotel, mom and pop restaurant, specialty resale, outfitter guide operation. People across the state are hurting. This industry is hurting. We're hearing from U.S. Travel that they're forecasting that this virus could impact the national travel and tourism industry to the tune of $910 billion. That it could result in a loss of 5.9 million jobs. That's 52% of every job in the U.S. travel and tourism industry. The losses in the travel and tourism industry alone, nationally, could drive our national unemployment rate up to 7.1%. Many are saying that this is 7 times the impact that was experienced following 9/11. Here in Oregon, we've begun subscribing to weekly Smith Travel Research reports. I know several of you are familiar with the monthly reports that we've been sending out. They make a weekly report available, and so in March we began subscribing to the weekly report so we could have as close to real-time data as we could in terms of their estimates of what's happening with lodging occupancy, average daily rates, and revenue and demand across the state. And in the first 3 weeks of March, we're seeing lodging revenues down roughly $38 million for the first 3 weeks of March. That's their estimate. This is about a 33% drop year over year. And again, it's for the first 3 weeks. Remember when Oregon started addressing COVID-19? Remember when the governor first came out with her first executive order, and at that time it was no mass gatherings over 250 people. You know, now it's a few people. It used to be social distancing was 3 feet. Now it's at least 6. The governor, as she said in her most recent press conference, has gone from asking to telling to now ordering people to stay home unless it's absolutely essential, that you go out for prescriptions, medical appointments, groceries, etc. So these are unprecedented times for us. And as we look at what's transpiring in the industry, the leadership team here at Travel Oregon has had to take a really hard look at what we envision happening with the potential for our revenue here, because we are funded, at least roughly 96 to 97% of our total budget is statewide transient lodging tax. We're projecting right now that we will end this year, this quarter, and therefore this year, we will, because we were running basically right at budget up through February. We think we'll end the year down anywhere from $3 to $5 million. That's what we'll be looking at between now and June 30. Similarly, as we look ahead to next year, the 2020-2021 fiscal year, we'll have a new basis if we're down $5 million over where we thought we would be. The sunset is scheduled to go into effect on July 1, so the lodging tax rate will drop from 1.8 to 1.5%, and we'll be reeling from the impacts of COVID-19 on the travel and tourism industry. As a result of that, we are currently building a budget scenario that is 40% down next year. So that means we will go from roughly if you'll allow me to use round figures, about a $40 million budget this year to $20 million next year. This is what we're using as a budget planning scenario as we get ready for next year. And it's why, as we would likely anticipate, there will come a time where a formal budget modification will need to be brought forward to the commission for their contemplation. What I'm asking you to do today is to address one piece of that. When we brought together our staff after we began our teleworking event, and we have all staff except for very few of us. I'm here in our Salem office. Scott and Jeff are in our Portland office, and there are occasionally a person or two that may stop in briefly to pick up a file or something that they need. We have them basically reserving a space in advance so we can, especially in the Portland office where we have the bulk of our staff, to make sure that we're able to maintain those social distancing guidelines. So as we look at how we best move forward, and as we shared with the staff team when we came together and had 65 people on one Zoom call for our first ever all-staff meeting via Zoom, I announced to them that the members of the leadership team at Travel Oregon were all immediately taking 20% reductions in their salary for the month of March and April for our VPs, for the bulk of our leadership team. Jeff, because he's very good at what he does, Jeff Hampton, our VP of Operations, did double check with the Department of Justice and confirmed that I cannot unilaterally reduce my own salary. And because it's in statute that only the commission has the authority to set my salary. So what I'm asking you to do today is agree with my request to reduce my salary 20% beginning March 1st of this year and going forward. And that is my request to you today. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And if there are none, I will turn it back over to Scott.
Commissioners, any questions for discussion?
So I do have a quick question. Scott, this is Kenji. Okay, if I go?
Please.
Okay. So Todd, has there been any discussion yet as of potentially having a special session where it would be considered to take care of that sunset that we had originally done earlier? Or is that, do you think that any sort of special session will be directly focused on COVID and the sunset would be addressed later or at another time? Well, it has to be before July.
Speaking very frankly right now, I would say the answer could very well be all of the above. I mean, and I'm just going based on even what I've read in the media, that there's been talk about, they have formed a special committee, a joint special committee to deal with addressing COVID-19 in Oregon. And they have had the opportunity to meet a couple of times and hear testimony from a variety of industry sectors. And the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association was there testifying on behalf of the state's travel and tourism industry. But there, as a result, there's been some talk about, would there be a special session around COVID to deal with the impacts of COVID? There's also a lot of interest in what's been passed at the federal level with the CARES Act and really understanding what that means. And there's a tremendous amount of assistance that's wrapped up in that $2 trillion bill. And that's just one of 3 bills that's come out. And they're talking, as you know, about contemplation of a kind of a 4th chapter in addressing COVID. So really the answer to your question is, looking at this spring, there's certainly interest in looking at COVID-19 from the legislature. They know there's a revenue forecast that'll be coming up in May, as there always is every year. There'll be another revenue forecast coming out. Whether or not there's a special session is up to legislative leadership and the governor, ultimately to come together around whether there are one or more special sessions to deal with anything left from the short session, as well as COVID-19 itself. And then of course, the other question is whether or not 4047, I'll use the bill number that it had in the short session, but whether or not that sunset provision becomes part of the legislation introduced during the special session. So there's a number of variables there, and right now I do not have a clear picture.
Okay, thanks, Todd.
You bet.
Commissioners, any other questions?
Hi. Hi,
Yes.
It's Maria. I'm sorry. Todd, I was just curious. My understanding is that you have not had to release anybody from staff at this time, just the reduction in wage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Commissioners, anyone else? Questions?
I guess I have one more question.
Sure.
Any contracts, Todd, anything that is pending that you've felt you need to cut back on at this point?
Well, rest assured that, this, while I mentioned to you the salary reduction specifically, I also referenced the fact that the leadership team has been poring over all of our programs, and that would include obviously all of our contracts. So we're looking at all the various contracts that we have in place in each of our various departments, whether they are presenters and trainers working with DDEV, advertising, social media experts working with us on our global marketing, or contractors internationally. We're looking at every contract. We're looking at what the balances are on those contracts. And we're also looking at what we believe would be feasible for us to undertake next year.
Right.
As part of it. So we have both that $3 to $5 million hole this year, as well as the budget reduction that we're anticipating for next year.
Right. Thank you.
So yes, we are looking at all that.
Yeah, I figured. I just questioned.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate having the opportunity to clarify.
Yes, Greg.
So that 2021-22 budget number you were discussing, what does that equate to? What's the nearest year that budget amount equates to for comparison? Like, is it close to the 2009-10 budget you worked off of?
No, it rolls us back to 20 million is roughly where we were before House Bill 4146 passed in the 2016 session. So basically it puts us back around 2014, 2015. So it rolls us back at least, I would say, roughly 5 to 6 years. The other piece, though, that's different now is that with the passage of 4146 and the increase in the lodging tax from 1 to 1.8%, there were also the requirements put in place that 20% of the revenue go to the RCTP program and 10% of the revenue go to the competitive grants program. That was not there in 2015 when our budget would have been around 20 million. And so the grant program was smaller. The RCTP program was probably more like $1.5 million versus where it is today, closer to 7 million. So if you look at a $20 million budget and the fact that we are embargoing those funds, right? We're holding those dollars in trust for the next year's expenditures. 30 cents out of every dollar of that 20 million is being held for the competitive grant program and the RCTP program, which means really the total budget available for Travel Oregon programs is closer to 14 million.
Okay.
And that puts us much closer to probably 2009.
Okay.
So one other question for me, if it's, so Todd, with 2021 being sort of held back because of the Olympics moving, is there any amounts still due on the sort of payments that we need to make to 2021, or are those being held back, or are we still too early to really figure out what's going on?
You know, it is early, Kenji. We know that the Olympics have been moved to 2021, and we're in conversations right now with Oregon 21 to determine what that will mean, and we'll keep you apprised of that as it develops. I've been on a couple of different calls. Teresa, of course, is on point for us on that work, and she's in regular communication with the staff and leadership of Oregon 21 so that we can really understand what this means, what the repercussions might be on Oregon 21 and where we are. What I can tell you in terms of financing for like the grant program, we've dispersed $7.5 million of the $10 million in our competitive grant to them so far.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you, Todd, and commissioners, for your questions. I'm interested at this time in a motion to reduce the Travel Oregon CEO salary by 20% effective March 1st, 2020. And is there a motion for that?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion of the motion? Okay, well, because we're utilizing the Zoom platform, we're going to use a roll call to ensure all commissioners are heard. Sarah will call the roll call, and each commissioner will be asked to unmute their microphone, although I don't think yours are muted at the moment, and respond with either yes to represent their support or no to represent a lack of support for the motion. Of course, you have the option of abstaining as well. Does anyone have questions with the roll call? Then Sarah, I'll let you take that call.
Commissioner Anway,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyles,
Yes.
Commissioner DeNovo,
Yes.
Commissioner Ponzi,
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard,
Did you hear that? Yes.
now we do, thank you. Commissioner Sugahara,
Yes.
Commissioner Willetts,
Yes.
Vice Chair Francisco,
Yes.
Chair Youngblood.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so by my count, the vote is unanimous and the motion passes. The intent was to have a relatively quick call today for the purpose of discussing this one piece of business, but it's not often that we all get the opportunity to be together. And so in that spirit, is there any other business or announcements from commissioners that you'd like to share at this time?
Scott, I'm going to raise my hand.
Yeah.
So one thing I really want to say is, Todd, leadership matters. And in these times, we're all in a space where things are going wrong and we don't know where we're going. And I just want to give you a shout out for the leadership that you have put forth to the commission and the entire team in providing all the updates that you do and keeping us informed of what's going on. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for just being there and providing the leadership that you do.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kenji.
I'd like to jump in and echo those thoughts. We are very fortunate to have such tremendous leadership, not only of our state, but also Todd's leadership. And I can tell you that we will get by. We are going to get through this. And as I keep telling my team, we're just going to look a little different on the other side. But we have an amazing, amazing product here. Oregon is something super special. We are hardy souls, and we will make it through. And I'm just so proud to be a part of it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maria. I would add that I trust everyone has had an opportunity to see some of the pieces of the Wyden and Kennedy campaign that has been published for the state of Oregon, the public service announcements. I hope you've all had an opportunity to see those and to appreciate the speed and obviously the pro bono nature with which that campaign was executed. My understanding is that it was made possible through the fact that there was already a contract with a state agency in place that enabled Wyden and Kennedy to move so swiftly to the aid of the state and our citizens. And of course, that was the contract through Travel Oregon. So my gratitude to the team at Wyden and Kennedy, to the folks at Travel Oregon that helped make it happen, and of course to the governor for her leadership in communicating an important message and the ability to do so in a compelling way.
Yeah. You know, that's well said, Scott. And I want to just acknowledge, you know, you think about the time frame on that. I received a phone call on Friday evening about the possibility of this type of campaign and wanting to connect with an ad agency. And of course, Travel Oregon has a contract in place with Wyden and Kennedy. And our team, in fact, the entire team at Wieden+Kennedy rose to that occasion. And that was on a Friday. And by Monday, they're working on creative, and Tuesday they're seeing first drafts, and Thursday it's getting ready to roll out, and Friday it's out. And a special shout out to Sarah Morrissey and Katie Clare on our team, because they project managed the relationship with the governor's office, the Oregon Health Authority, OHSU, and Wieden+Kennedy in being able to deliver on this, while the team is also still strategizing about recovery campaigns and pouring over other programs and budgets and contracts like we discussed earlier. So, Kenji, if I can, in the form of a go back, I appreciate your comment. I appreciate the compliment. But you need to know that any passion that you're sensing from me is fueled by the fact that there's 65 really brilliant people that are, I guess I was going to say showing up at Travel Oregon every day, but I can't say that anymore. But they're teleworking and virtually showing up at Travel Oregon every day, passionate about their work, believing in the power of the travel and tourism industry, finding purpose in what they do and knowing that the work they do matters. And it's, when you love what you do, where you get to do it and who you get to do it with, that's a trifecta that's pretty rare. And so we're all pretty blessed.
Hear, hear.
Here, here.
Thank you for that, Todd. And commissioners, you, if you haven't already heard, and I'm just going to be editorial for a moment, you certainly will, that this is not a time for tourism promotion. And I can certainly appreciate the sentiment with which that is delivered. That's delivered in the context that we're in the midst of a pandemic, that it's a medical emergency, and that it amounts to an economic crisis. But we have to be cognizant of the scope of that economic crisis and where it is most immediately found. The workers who are impacted most severely work with you. They work for you. And no one can tell you that you are somehow detached from the economic emergency that is this global coronavirus pandemic. You're feeling it every day. And it is with the resurrection of tourism that we can accelerate a recovery from the economic element of this crisis. And it's through the work of destination management and marketing organizations, big and small, but none bolder and more decisive than Travel Oregon, in my opinion, that we can accelerate this recovery. Be prepared for those conversations. I hope you get to have them. I hope you get to have them with open-minded individuals who are willing to understand that the work that this agency does means jobs and economic development and growth in an almost real-time way for Oregonians, for your employees, your work families. With that, I'm compelled to remind you that our next scheduled Tourism Commission public meeting is June 15th and 16th, scheduled currently to take place down in Lakeview, God willing, if the creek don't rise. If there's no further business, and I'm just scanning the monitors to see if anybody is asleep, then we're adjourned. Have a great afternoon, friends.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Take care.
Indeed. Take care, all.
Be safe.
Be healthy.